Hello? You know, a lot of people think it's very rude to have your phones out. It's not rude, especially when you're taking pictures and video and tagging hashtag CannaGather on Facebook. So, exactly, right? That was clever, right? I try really hard here. So, bust out your phones if you want, now or in the future. Make sure you tag hashtag CannaGather or @CannaGather. This is our third consecutive event with over 200 people. So a round of applause for you guys. On the serious side, I told you all that I had a secret to share, and I was not lying to you. For the past few weeks, I've had muscle twitches, so you may see some tonight. It's getting better and almost gone, so hopefully not. I bring it in part to preempt your question of, what the fuck was that? And also to thank you. And lastly, to remind myself and hopefully you about an important point. 2 weeks ago today, the neurologist said that there was a non-zero probability that I had epilepsy. But I subconsciously felt at peace, ostensibly because I knew this community and plant would take care of me if I did. So thank you all. The next day during the actual epilepsy test, I had 2 convulsions. For the next few hours, I wasn't thinking about the diagnosis. I was scared of how I felt and afraid that I was not in control of my body. Fortunately, it was not neurological. My EEG was okay, and I'll be fine. But that moment crystallized how important this plant is for patients around the world. There are people in this room who use THC and CBD for medicinal purposes. Hopefully you don't have to experience what I did, but it is an important reminder that we're having fun, we're building relationships, looking for opportunities, and we're actually saving people's lives. Thanks. Thank you. CannaGather is a team effort, though, and I'm glad they let me come up here and say stuff, or at least they haven't tried to stop me more than once. So thank you, Tiana, Thomas, Mason, and Linda, who you met at the door, Thomas Sr. with the drinks, Jackie on social media, Kim and Andrew on the news, as you'll see in a bit, our lawyer, Don, Gary, Ronnie, and the new guy, Zach, on strategy. Tim and David on photo and video. Hi, David. And then Sanjay is back in action right there. So if you bought a VIP host committee ticket, as I'm sure you were all wondering when you bought your actual tickets, you get 4 tickets, swag from our awesome sponsors, your CBD oils, Dr. Hartridge's Healthcare Solutions, chocolate truffles, they're pretty dope, Tribe Tokes, somewhere over there she is, and CBD fruit chews from a stealth hemp company whose founder may or may not be in our midst, but still wants to be stealth. But most importantly, you get a shout out. So thank you so much to Catherine Brinkman, Francelina Perdomo, and Thomas Rochko Sr. from BX Baller Foundation. And one of my favorite games of the month, raise your hand if you are building a company. Sweet, that is awesome. Kim's building a company. Raise your hand if you're an investor. Raise your hand if you're an investor but don't want to tell people that you're an investor. I see a couple people, but that's fine. Raise your hand if you're a company in stealth. No, it's fine. I won't call those people out. So speaking of which, in terms of people that are building companies, as you'll see in a bit, we like to feature some of the startups here in New York, as we'll do with Nuravine in a sec. So if you are building a startup and you're interested in coming up here and sharing what you're working on. I won't be on stage if you don't want. Most people don't. Then come email me, josh@cannagather.com. We'd love to get you featured, help you find press, partners, investment, team members, whatever you're looking for. One of the last questions I'll ask, who's been here before? Show of hands. That's cool. So first timers, show of hands. That is a lot of people. Thank you so much for coming. Our next event is going to be April 17th. It's the inaugural CannaGather 420 Awards. The 4 is in parentheses, so we're going to award 20 awards to industry leaders here in the New York City area who are driving the cannabis industry forward, particularly those who have done some pretty awesome stuff in the last year. In particular, we're going to give a Lifetime Achievement Award to Ethan Nadelman. If you don't know who he is, then you should Google Ethan Nadelman, watch his TED Talk, or review any of the other hundreds or thousands of things that he's done. I mean, you never know. But he says that he is coming, and he's going to share his wisdom for approximately 15 minutes. So if you want to meet Ethan, hear his wisdom, Ethan will be there. We will honor him with a Lifetime Achievement Award, as well as 20 industry leaders. So that'll be April 17th. Go to nextevent.cannagather.com. And I'll stop talking as much as I have been. So let's introduce our sponsors, then Kim B, then Kieran, Nuravine, and Roger. So if you guys didn't know, we have an after party that runs from 9 to midnight. It's pretty fun. You should come. And lastly, if you know someone who wants to be a sponsor, then let me know as well. So special shout out, Casa Verde Capital. They just announced their $45 million raise. VC firm in the industry, Galvanize, for hosting us. Baked by Melissa. We had 400 cupcakes last time. We have 500 tonight.
I ate 50 of them.
We have 450 cupcakes tonight. 450. Outcrowd Group, who's here, RJ, is somewhere. There he is. Hi. We got 3Win Corp, I believe is how you pronounce it, Eric, right? Thank you. 3Win Corp. Vortex Power Fans by Atmosphere. If you're looking for ventilation hardware, they're the folks to go to. And Dr. Hartridge's Healthcare Solutions. Lastly, CLLassociates, who you'll hear from in a bit. So Hampton's MediSpa can't be here, but Jackie's here representing Hampton's MediSpa.
How's everyone doing tonight? Yeah, good? Not so good? All right. Well, how many people here would like to have a medical marijuana card in New York? Come on. Now, how many people here think they qualify to get a medical marijuana card in New York? All right, everyone's hand should be up because you never know if you qualify. There are like a lot of conditions, a lot of options. So go to hamptonsmedispa.com and see if you qualify.
Cool. Thank you, Jackie. Dej from Tribe Tokes.
Woo.
I know you don't like the spotlight.
Okay. This is a good-looking crowd tonight. Or maybe I'm just a little high. Either way. Hi, everyone. I'm Deja, and I'm the co-founder of Tribe Tokes. We sell cannabis accessories and lifestyle products, focusing on user experience and an elevated aesthetic. We also curate and sell other brands in our community that we love. So if you have a brand or a company and want to collaborate, please come say hello after the panels. We'll be selling a few of our products at the after party, and everything's 20% off if you show that you're following us on Instagram. It's at TribeTokes, TribeTokes. All right, thanks.
So as you guys know, that I never start speaking at CannaGather unless I have some of the CBD tincture here. It's peppermint, it's refreshing and amazing. So Craig, tell me, what is your favorite product from your collection?
Peppermint.
Yeah. And if you haven't had it, I suggest that you ask him. He's very generous and will give you a free sample. What is the biggest misconception on CBD?
People think it's going to get them high, when in reality, it does not get them high. If you happen to be high, so you get all the benefits of the CBDs without the effects of the THC.
Awesome. Where can we find your goods?
YourCBDOils.com.
All right, guys, you heard it here.
Kim, don't leave me. We want you for the news.
Good evening, everyone. Gather round. Welcome to the wild world of weed. I'm your plug for news and events. This is Cannabis with Kim B. Shouts to Andrew. Andrew, raise your hand. No, Andrew, stand up. Please stand up. Andrew writes all my news for me. And it's fucking funny, too. So I'm always so grateful. So thank you, Andrew. Who follows me on Instagram? Yes, honey. It's at Cannabis with Kim B. Kim is spelled with a Y. Why? You know why. So this weekend, you go on my Instagram, I'm your plug for news and events. Everything's up there. So if you need information, hit me up. This weekend I was hanging out with Junior Mafia and Little C's, and Nino, aka Junior Mafia, comes up to me and he says, Kim B, you're the boss lady of cannabis. And I said, Nino, why would you say that? And he goes, because you always show up. You know what, people? If you want to be part of the community, then you need to show up. So I suggest that you grab a membership with CannaGather and sit your butts in here all 12 months. Because these are the people that are going to help drive your business and get you to where you want to be. And I can say that. Because I'm Cannabis with Kim B, and a year ago, I met this man, well, a year and a half. And Ronnie, where are you, Ronnie? My brother, and Oleg, who's not here. And they helped introduce me to everyone, and now I am in the cannabis industry, and I quit my $100,000 a year job to go into cannabis full time, and because of CannaGather. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, down to the news. Cannabis could generate $106 billion in tax revenue if it were federally legal. Want to know how President Trump and Congress generate 1 million jobs and get the funds for infrastructure, healthcare reform, and pretty much everything else besides that racist-ass wall? Federally legalized cannabis sales. New Frontier data reports that in addition to jobs, the U.S. could generate $105.6 billion by 2025. Hashtag, that is how you make America great again. Walmart dips its toes into the cannabis sector. Walmart made its first steps into cannabis by becoming a retail of cannabis potting soils, Sohum living soils, and Mary Jane root probiotic. Woo! If more products hit the shelves, revenues could go up. When asked what would result in higher employee wages, Walmart officials said and laughed like a 90s cartoon villain. Hashtag, if you've ever been to Walmart, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. Trump's opioid plan includes the death sentence. Really. Speaking of the president, Donald Trump's plan for the opioid crisis includes the death penalty for drug dealers. Reports cite Trump's fondness for oppressive regimes such as China and the Philippines approach to drugs, which makes the sign hashtag 5,176 democracies doing just fine. Hashtag Merca. Activists push state to expunge misdemeanors. A group of legal activists challenging 8 U.S. states to follow the city of San Francisco's example to expunge records of people with misdemeanors, marijuana possession records. The logical move to make sense prompted San Francisco's Tenderloin district to say, how can we get some of that logical, humane treatment? Hashtag, we demand justice. California tells weed maps to cut it out. Earlier this month, the state of California set a cease and desist order to weed maps in regards to advertising unlicensed businesses on their site. Weed maps replied, nah, saying it's the state's problem. Meanwhile, Leafly offered a cease without being asked. So right now, Weed Maps is kind of that dickhead kid in the 6th grade that kind of has valid points. Let's see where this plays out. Hashtag Mo Green, Mo Problems. U.S. prosecutors take on small-time cannabis cases, but they won't. Now for something different. Good news from Jeff Sessions. The Attorney General and part-time Keebler elf said that federal prosecutors will not take on small-time marijuana cases. The decision by Sessions maintains Obama-era policies despite repealing the Cole memo. The sensible move seems out of step with Sessions, which means likely he will do something oppressive in the next few days to balance it out. It's about time, fucking Jeff Sessions. And that's all I have tonight, guys. Who's gonna party with me at Adore Lay afterwards? Yes. Who wants to buy me a drink and pizza? I get it for free, but I'll take another one. Anyway, Adore Lay is just a block up the street, and that's where the real grit happens, where the rubbing elbows comes down, where you get to talk to the people that you wanted to talk to all night but didn't really have the nerve to, because there's drinks, pizza, and low light. So I look forward to seeing all of you guys there. Thank you.
So the first time around, so I don't really like surprises, especially with this. So the first time around, I had Kim, show me in advance, and then I laughed a lot, and I was like, you know what? Just don't tell me. And I feel like it's better that way. It's funnier when you don't know, and then all of a sudden she just hits you with the humor, and it's like, okay, that was really funny. So no, these laughs are not. It's not acting. As you all know, I'm not a good actor.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, CannaGather, for allowing me to come tonight to speak to you about trademark protection for your brands. That'll be the topic.
Hello? Okay. I'm not really a technology guy, right? That was a joke. Let's switch. So just hit the right button to go through slides. So some of you know this better than others in the context of me. Trademark is pretty important. So brought in one of the experts, if not the expert, to help share some information. So thank you, Kieran, for swinging by. We'd love to know just a little bit about you, what you're up to, and how you got into the cannabis industry.
All right, I'm with a firm called Cowan, Liebowitz, and Latman, which is here in Manhattan. We primarily do trademark, copyright, and patent work. I represent clients from Major League Baseball to High Times Magazine. I've been representing High Times for 20 years. And that's how I first started paying attention to this. About 5 years ago, I was talking with that client about how you might be able to get federal protection for plant-touching goods and services. And on a flight to Mexico with my family, I wrote an article which then spun out into several articles and several speaking engagements like this one.
I know that you have a bit of a presentation lined up, so maybe we should dive into that.
Sure. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the unique challenges that a lot of you in this room are facing in connection with protecting your brands. As we saw in that first slide that showed who the sponsors are, brands are critical to identifying who we are in the business workplace. And a lot of companies in conventional consumer good areas have no problem protecting those brands as long as they pay attention and commit some resources to doing so. But if you're involved with plant-touching goods or services, you face some unique challenges. And it's all a matter of legality and illegality. So let's start by acknowledging the fact that we know that there are some activities and some products which are legal in some states and not in others. So casino gambling, fireworks, and radar detectors, illegal in some states, legal in others, right? All right, so how are they treated in the trademark office? Well, the trademark office has issued a trademark registration for gambling, for casino services, and for radar detectors. So we've got Cobra registered for radar detectors, and that was Caesar's Palace registered for casino gambling. And when we talk about the challenges, we're not talking about the nature of the mark, the word Cobra. It's that the goods for which it's registered are radar detectors, okay? So here's a product that's illegal in many states, yet the trademark office issues a registration. And even firecrackers. Black Cat is registered for firecrackers. Prostitution services, illegal in 49 states, legal in just one. What does the trademark office do when someone applies to register Mustang Ranch for prostitution services? They issue the registration. And if you look carefully, the registration covers legal prostitution services. Now this becomes important. In fact, oddly enough, it was when I was putting together one of these presentations and came across this registration that I got an idea for a little trick that will help you all in this room. No pun intended with trick. So if the Federal Trademark Office will issue registrations for prostitution services, how about medical marijuana dispensaries? Will they issue a trademark registration on the federal level for vapor room, and with this design for medical marijuana dispensary services? No, they will not. So why would that be? There's two reasons. Number one is that the Trademark Office has a requirement that they'll only register a mark for use in connection with lawful goods and services. That's not to say that the mark can never be used for anything illegal. We're not talking about, the many ways in which you're using your mark. But in order to get a registration, the thing you have to be asking them to protect is the mark in connection with lawful goods and services. All right, so that's hurdle number one for a lot of people in this room. Hurdle number two is the Controlled Substance Act. All right, so, you hear, I think we even talk about legalizing in certain states, and certainly the media uses that term loosely, and it's an absolute misnomer. There is no such thing as legal medical marijuana dispensary services in this country. Our sense of legality is a product of prosecutorial discretion. Feds say, we'll keep our hands off, leave it to the states. And then certain states, 30, will decide, okay, we'll create regulations that allow people to distribute medical marijuana. So it's really not legalization, it's prosecutorial discretion. And as far as the trademark is concerned, the Trademark Office is concerned, the CSA is the law of the land, and therefore, all your plant-touching goods and activities are unlawful in the eyes of the Trademark Office. So, what can you do if you want to protect the brand that you invested in from being used by someone else? Puffco. How can Puffco, for example, prevent someone from using Puffco in another state? You can't just look at the federal trademark register and decide whether, well, no one else has registered it, so I'm free to use it. No. In the United States, trademark rights come from use. So if someone has started using your mark before you've begun using it, they win, you lose, you'll have to stop and maybe pay damages. So go to the trouble of clearing your mark. It's something that any IP attorney who knows what they're doing can do for you. It's not cheap, but it's not backbreaking either, and it's way better to anticipate the problem before you invest in your brand and then find that you have to change it, or worse, get sued. So be sure to clear your mark. The other thing I'll mention to you is, don't think that just because you're using a mark that's pretty famous but for totally unrelated things, you're free to use it because it's a joke or a parody. If you're using Pac-Man, P-A-C-M-A-N, in connection with a marijuana club or marijuana distribution services, you can bet that the folks who own the Pac-Man mark will come after you. And you might say, oh, it's a joke. Well, if you're using it commercially, that doesn't work. And you might say, well, our goods and services have nothing to do with video games. Leave me alone. And there's something called dilution for super famous marks, which means that even if the goods that you're using it for are unrelated to the goods they have rights for, you could still be in trouble and they could still force you to stop. So don't screw around by taking super famous marks and using them for your products thinking you'll get away with it. Number 2 of 6 points on how to protect your mark. Rely on your common law rights. As I mentioned, when you're clearing a mark, don't believe anyone if they tell you that only marks that are registered are entitled to protection. Even if you do nothing else, and all you're doing is using a mark, you can have trademark rights in that mark. You don't have to register it. There's a lot of benefits to registering it, but you don't have to. And here's the problem with relying on your common law rights. If you have a license to grow and distribute in one state, and that's one state is the only place you're using your mark, that's the only state in which you're going to have rights. So someone else who's passing through your state and sees your business idea, your brand, can then go off to their own home state, get a license, and start ripping you off. And at this moment, there's nothing you could do about it because common law rights are limited to the geographic area in which you're using your mark. So good news, you have rights. Bad news, they're extremely limited to just the territory in which you're using them. Point number 3, state trademark applications. Let's put the federal registrations aside. Every state in the country has a system by which you can register your mark, your trademark within that state. It's not the Secretary of State's office where you register your name. It's a totally different mechanism. So you can get a registration, a trademark registration, on a state level for marijuana distribution services, for medical marijuana dispensaries, okay? So for example, we talked earlier about the vapor room, right? Well, look at this. The owners of that mark own a state court registration in California specifically covering medical marijuana dispensary services. So whereas the federal government has this rule about lawful use in commerce and any goods or services that relate to the CSA being prohibited, the states don't have that attitude, okay? So you can get a state registration, and it's certainly worth doing in the states in which you're operating. The two shortcomings of state registrations, though, are number one, just like common law use, they're geographically limited to that state, okay? So suppose you have a license to have a dispensary in California, and so you get a state registration in California, you can't then expand that to any other state until you get your license and build your business and start distributing in, let's say you're going to New York, okay? So you're not going to be able to blanket the country the same way you could with a federal registration. The other problem with state trademark applications is, on a federal level, you can file what's called an intent to use application. You don't have to be using your mark before you file your application. So as you're building your business and you have this great brand and you're preparing to open up for business and you want to keep anyone else from ripping off your brand, on a federal level, all you have to do is file an intent to use application, and that's your placeholder, okay? And it gives you time to grow your business without having to look over your shoulder to see if someone's going to rip off your brand. On a state level, they do not have intent to use systems. So with the exception of one state, which I'll mention, you actually have to be open, operating, and using your mark before you can apply to register it, okay? That's a shortcoming of the state system. That's not to say the state system's worthless, but it has challenges. The one state in which you can have an intent to use application, where you can file your application for your mark even before you're using it, is Washington State. And in Washington State, you can file once, and they'll give you 6 months to show use, okay? And if you're not able to show use within that 6 months, you're out of luck, and you can't file another intent to use application. You'll have to wait until you actually start using. Next up, register the copyright in your designs. I have a brochure out there that some of you picked up called "A Trademark is Not a Copyright or a Patent," and that's true. And these things trademarks protect the identity of a brand, the name of your brand, a logo that's associated with your brand, the Nike swoosh. Copyrights protect creative works. So whether it's a poem or a design or a particularly creative logo, you can protect that under copyright laws. So going back to Vapor Room, okay? If I were them, I would apply to register that copyright. It's extremely inexpensive, and the Copyright Office doesn't care about lawful use in commerce, and you'll get your registration, and if someone else tries using Vapor Room in a different state or your own state, whatever, you can send them a demand letter, and in that letter, you'll be able to tell them, if you do not stop, and if you force me to sue you, I'll get statutory damages and attorney's fees. It puts more skin in the game for them. No one in this room you'd never want to litigate a case. I hope it never happens to you. It's expensive, disruptive, miserable. Sometimes you have no choice because it's the only way to enforce your rights. But demand letters, a forceful demand letter, can prevent the litigation and still force someone to stop violating your rights. And when you're able to say in that demand letter, if you don't stop, I'm going to get attorney's fees and statutory damages, people's heads snap around, they pay attention, and they often stop what they're doing. That only happens, though, if you file for your copyright in your design before the infringement begins, okay? So number 4 on the list of 6 things to do to protect your brand is register the copyright in your designs. Number 5, register around the edges. Remember I said the trademark office doesn't care, well, let me put it this way. The prohibition is not on trademarks that have the word marijuana in them. The prohibition is on trademarks, regardless of what the mark is, where someone seeks to get a registration in connection with unlawful goods or services. So as long as the goods and services listed in your application are not prohibited under the Controlled Substance Act, you're going to get your registration, all other things being equal. So this means that you register around the edges. You register your mark for use in connection with things that aren't necessarily plant touching, but things that are related to marijuana in the marijuana industry. So for example, All Bud has a registration covering providing a website for commercial purposes featuring ratings, reviews, referrals, information, and recommendations relating to businesses, services, service providers, events, and products in the medical marijuana industry. This is going to cruise right through because there's nothing unlawful about giving people information, okay? And let's suppose All Bud also has a dispensary. Well, they didn't apply to register for the dispensary services because they would never get it. But by having this registration, if someone else tries to use All Bud for dispensary services, this is going to be a pretty effective weapon because you go to court and you say, Your Honor, I have a registration for All Bud for services very closely related to distribution services. What they're doing is likely to cause confusion. They're infringers. Make them stop, and you'll win. All right? A registration like this will help you a great deal in enforcing your rights. And again, you want to stay out of court. It'll help you when you write those demand letters or when your lawyer does. So, but I'll caution you, whatever it is that you're registering for, you actually have to be using the Mark IV. Don't screw around with them because then you're going to spend all this time and effort on something that is invalid, and the minute you get in a fight over it, it'll be canceled. So, you know, it doesn't take much to provide these types of services. And if you're in the plant touching industry, you can expand to provide these types of services and get a registration for your mark. The last strategy is a little bit complicated. It evolved over time, and basically it's this. Argue from a position of strength. Anticipate your fight with the trademark office and make that fight about not whether or not the goods and services you're applying for are lawful, but whether or not they exist. And this strategy I came across when I remember that Mustang Ranch where it said legal prostitution services. Well, it occurred to me on the federal level, you can file an intent to use application, and once it's approved by the trademark office and they say, okay, there's no problems with it, they'll issue what's called a notice of allowance, where they say, okay, go ahead, now tell me if you've begun using it and give me a specimen, and if you haven't, you could just file for an extension and you get 6 more months to do it. Well, you can file for 5 extensions, and that buys you 4 years of time. So the trick that I came up with allows you to have a placeholder for 4 years. Perhaps in that 4 years, marijuana will be moved off Schedule 1, and then your problem is resolved. And even if it isn't, then you just file a new application, okay? So, Cannabis Cup, got an office action. The refusal, it's not lawful use in commerce. It's for marijuana-related goods and services based on the evidence they found. They looked up the mark. This is what they do. They're paying attention. There are 8 trademark examiners in Washington who handle all the trademark-related applications with their supervisor every Wednesday to discuss how to handle these. And if the mark smacks of marijuana or cannabis, they're going to dig around and see if the goods and services you're providing are lawful. So office action is basically their objection. So I responded to that. They said that they wanted to know whether they needed additional information. Are goods and services prohibited under the Controlled Substance Act? And for this one, we were actually applying for marijuana distribution services and actual marijuana product. So we came back and we said to them, bakery goods and dessert items, namely cakes, cookies, pastries, and brownies for retail and wholesale distribution and consumption on and off the premises, all of the foregoing being lawful under both state and federal law. So their question was, are the goods and services for which you're applying lawful? And we said, yep, we're applying for marijuana distribution services, or in this case, cannabis-infused baked goods, lawful under state and federal law. There is no such thing, right? So the trademark office came back and they said, no, we're refusing this registration because this is not lawful use in commerce. You're applying to register something which is unlawful. And here we launched into a philosophical debate, both on paper and over the phone. I responded to that refusal by saying, the question confronted is not whether the goods and services at issue here are lawful, but rather whether they exist. And since they do not currently exist, should the applicant be afforded the customary allowance period for them to come into existence and for the applicant to use its mark with them in commerce? So the trademark examiner called me and was a little bit skeptical. And I tried to explain to him what I was saying. And this is what I was saying. If somebody was applying to register for a medical device that was still under development and they had not yet been able to use the mark on that device, the trademark office wouldn't bat an eyelash. They'd issue the notice allowance and they'd get their 4 years to put up or shut up. All I was asking for was the same opportunity. So I get on the phone with the examiner and he's really not budging much, but I feel he's a little bit more receptive than he had been. So I said, can we talk to the supervisor? We get on the phone with me, the examiner, and the supervisor, and I make my argument. And she paused for a minute, and she said, oh, like a perpetual motion machine. And that wasn't what I was thinking, but I'll go with it. It doesn't yet exist, and if someone applied to register, Spacely Sprockets for a perpetual motion machine, the trademark office might think they're freaked, but they're not going to refuse them their application. So eventually I was able to persuade the examiner, and more importantly the supervisor, that this is not a question about whether the goods and services for which we applied were lawful, it's whether they existed, and they've issued a notice of allowance, and now we'll have a few years in which to show the trademark office that we are using our product, our mark, in connection with marijuana distribution services lawful under both state and federal laws. So here's to that.
That was pretty cool. I guess just one quick question, just to clarify for everyone in the room. It sounds like the main takeaway is that it's much more defensive than offensive. The idea is to try to protect yourself going forward.
Protect yourself. You do want to preserve your ability to continue using your mark, so that's a defensive posture. And by filing, this is one of the benefits of filing an application, is it puts the world on notice, because not everyone's going to do that, what I call a common law search, to see if anyone's using their marks. Some people will just ask themselves, is anyone registering it or trying to register it? And if you file on the state or federal system, at least you'll be hitting people's radar, and most people are acting in good faith, and most people don't want a trademark fight. So by at least applying, you're putting the world on notice that this is your mark, stay away. They might ignore it, but most won't. So defensively, you're doing it in order to prevent someone else from telling you to stop. But no, there's also an offensive element of it, which is, does anyone here want to invest in their brand and build their brand in California only to go up to Washington and see someone else using their exact same brand? Absolutely not. So you do want to be able to have that hammer or that sword as well as having the shield.
Cool. So we're going to do questions. Kieran's actually coming to the after party, I think. Cool. And then if anyone's actually interested in a 1-hour session with Kieran, he's been generous enough to offer that to one lucky member of the folks here. So email me, josh@CannaGather.com, and we're going to do a bit of a raffle amongst the folks. So,
and that's a free session. Anyone who wants to pay my rate, I'll meet with all of you.
It's expensive.
It's less expensive than a lot of firms.
So very quickly, I want to bring up CannaGather's own, CannaGather community. We did nothing to help except cheerlead from afar. So Nuravine, some exciting news. Come share.
Yeah. Hello. Okay. Hi everyone. Hi. Hi, I'm Alex, and this is my partner Adrian. And yeah, you can see we're Nuravine. And so first, let me start off by telling you a little bit about what we do. So we make an automated hydroponic system. So if anyone doesn't know about hydroponics, it's basically where you can grow a plant in water instead of soil. And so in order to give the plant the nutrients that it needs, you're going to need to add different nutrient solutions, and you're going to also need to balance the pH so the plants can be happy. So the machine that we built actually has sensors that are going into the water, and it can detect these different nutrient and pH levels and then automatically adjust them, so the farmers aren't going to really need to do any of that work, and they can do other tasks that are more higher level. So how did we get started? Well, I met this guy, Adrian, in this crazy electrical engineering class, and we were so lucky to find each other because we had such this amazing working relationship. And one day I decided, I was like, hey, Adrian, like, what if we like built this crazy skyscraper in Manhattan that was like a robot, and it was growing plants for everyone? And he was like, no, we can't do that. That's crazy. But what if we just took like a computer and got it to grow one plant? What would happen with that? And so I was like, all right, let's start with that. So we actually were able to build this thing, but we couldn't figure out how to turn it into a business because it cost us like $3,000 to make. It had all this crazy technology in it, but it could only grow one plant. But there was still hope for us because we had all this technology. We're like, what if we just took it like out of the box and made it into a modular system? So that's kind of what we're working on right now, and I'll let Adrian tell you what's going on.
So as a part of our development, we got into a National Science Foundation program where we're going to be traveling around the country, visiting farmers of all types, cannabis included, of course. And so, and we're kind of, crazy engineers, and we're always coming up with these crazy ideas of how we can kind of change the conditions around how these plants are growing and really kind of influence what chemicals are in them and stuff like that. But since we're engineers, we really need to get and talk to growers, the real experts, the people who really know what these plants need. And so we want to talk with them, figure out exactly what is important for them, and ensure that they can grow the best bud in town.
Yeah, so, well, sorry, that was too loud. So again, like our ask is, we're looking for anyone that is a grower or that knows growers that are interested in sort of having an interview with us so that we can learn what technology that we should work on that could better serve them. And also, we're interested in talking to anyone here, so after the event or at the after party, we'd be happy to talk to anyone who wants to learn more about what we're doing. And so again, I just really want to thank Josh and everyone from the CannaGather community for putting this on. This is about like the 12th CannaGather we've gone to. And if it weren't for this, like it would be much harder for us to be pursuing our dreams in the cannabis space. And we're glad this thing exists so that everyone can pursue their dreams and make the cannabis community like way better for the future. And I love you, Kim, too. Yay! All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh.
Our next speaker, been trying to get him to come out for about a year now. When I first met him, I was like, this dude's like Steve Jobs, but of cannabis. And we finally got him to come out. Some of you may know his brand. It's a company called Puffco. A lot of folks like it. They just launched a very exciting new product that I believe he has brought tonight to share, or at least show off. The Puffco Peak. It's a very limited edition, which is why I was actually very surprised that he brought one. So thank you, Puffco CEO and founder, Roger Volodarsky.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Anything else?
So this is really cool. As I said, been trying to make this happen for a while, and I know you've been very, very busy doing exciting stuff, selling tons of product. Congratulations, making cool videos.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe some of your background as well.
So I am Roger Volodarsky. I created Puffco by accident. It's a company that was really a side project. I just wanted to make a vaporizer that didn't suck, and that challenge has existed until this day. I am a serial entrepreneur. There's not much I haven't tried. I'm sure there are a bunch of you out there that are just trying to find something that you can be passionate about, and that was me. And there have been times in my life where that was easy to find, and times where it hasn't. And Puffco And being in this industry has been the most rewarding thing that's ever happened to me. So it's a quick brief.
So how is it an accident? Tell us more.
I mean, I was, man, the New Yorkers here that can remember in 2013, 2012, vape pens kind of hit the scene, and it's different here than it was in California. We were liberated. California, they're like, what are you guys doing? That's stupid. Dab, pull out a torch, you know, use that. But for us, we got to use in public for the first time ever. And what I found was a lot of the vaporizers I was using, I was kind of pushing to the limits. They were made of plastic. They would melt on me. I'd find that I was inhaling all of this melted plastic. And one day a friend of mine was like, dude, you're really passionate about this. Why don't you try to make your own? And I knew nothing about product development. I'm still learning. And because I didn't know anything, I said, sure, why not? And if I knew better, I wouldn't have tried. So that's why it's an accident.
And what were you doing before? You said you were a serial entrepreneur.
I've done everything from mortgages to systems administration, everything. I feel like I have sold everything. I have tried everything. Yeah, it's hard to think of something I haven't just given a shot.
And I guess you were mostly in like a sales, business development role in these?
Sales, finance, marketing. Marketing has been the one common thread amongst everything I've done. I've always enjoyed trying to find a way to get it to appeal to people or to speak directly to the person I'm trying to reach.
So I think that the thing that struck me when we first met was, and I think that was sort of the Steve Jobs part, is how particular and consistent and strong the branding was. Each product sort of has the same thread of design. So I thought that was interesting. And then also we'll speak to the innovation. So I guess the first part is the design. What is your approach to design and marketing?
So for design, it really started with things I want. So going back to the Pro, which was like the first product we released and had success with, I wanted it to have no plastics. We built our advertising around that. The Pro had no plastics, no glues, no fibers. I said that so many times, I'm sick of saying it. And that's kind of where it began. And so if we're not going to use plastics, metal made sense. And shiny metal is obviously beautiful, so we incorporated that. We really just wanted something durable. And when you're making products for cannabis, if it treats the plant in the exact way it wants to be treated, ideal temperatures, ideal encasing, ideal vapor path, you're going to have an amazing experience. So we put that above everything else. First, does it work? Does it give me the feeling I want? Is it something I'm going to use with me every day? That peak isn't here because I wanted to show it to you guys. That would have been a good reason to probably bring one. It's here because I can't go a day without it.
There's no illegal product in this, by the way, just to be clear.
Not yet.
There's not. This is totally legal. CannaGather does not support illegal consumption in any way, but this is really cool.
Thank you. Thank you. So. So we start with this bucket, this atomizer here. This is actually where this project began. I knew what shape I wanted it to be, roughly. We knew like a couple of key points. We wanted to hold it like this specifically. We wanted it to fit into a cup holder. But testing began with this atomizer. We wanted to make absolute sure this replicated the same experience you get when you torch a nail, you wait the exact amount of time it needs to cool. We wanted to replicate that, and then everything else kind of came after. It feels like it kind of made itself, almost, like it wanted to exist. And once this little piece came, everything flowed with it. We actually have our industrial designer, Justin, here in the crowd.
Hi, Justin.
Who randomly just popped out. Who's blushing very much right now?
So I guess, how many hours and what was the process by which you spent in Colorado testing this and iterating?
Colorado, LA, Washington. Washington used to be an amazing place. I used to call it not Oregon so much, but man, Washington used to be like the hash capital until recreational came, and now you can't even smell weed before you buy it in Washington. It's actually what helped make the company. Leaving New York helped a ton. We're in a bubble here. Everyone here, if they light up anything outside, you're looking over your back. You guys kind of haven't experienced the real freedom of just operating in a space where you're not doing anything wrong, nobody thinks less of you, nobody is going to not want to talk to you because you smell that way or because you brought up that you smoke weed. So for me, it kind of opened up this world of cannabis isn't just this counterculture, it's a movement that is growing quickly in many places. And I just happen to be in a place where it's many years behind.
That makes sense. So I guess just in terms of what was the process from a product development standpoint? Because clearly both of you guys spent a lot of time honing in on the product and iterating to get it just right. Like, could you walk us through what that experience was like?
So there's two sides of it. There's the mechanical engineering part, and then there's the industrial design of it, which is what Justin helped us with. So on the mechanical engineering part, that's the atomizer. We start with our head of product development, Avi. He's not here. He's very warm in LA right now. We start with just the atomizer, just like I said a moment ago. How can we get this to replicate this one experience, which we did not think was going to be possible. But as we start getting closer now, we start thinking, what do we want it to feel like? And what Justin goes and does is he draws out literally, I mean, I think we had hundreds and hundreds of designs that start with, what do you feel about these? And we just know every single thing we definitely don't like, and we talk about the parts of the things we love. And it's a very long, many, many months, I would say, just the design. Yeah, just drawing. 7 months, 8 months, yeah, or closer to a year, really. So when I say that it kind of made itself, it's that way because we didn't start saying, I want this conical shape with this snap base or any of that. It was the best of a million different designs we made that kind of came together to end up being this, which we love.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's a lesson for all the entrepreneurs out there that things really do take time and iteration and a lot of planning. That's a lot of time.
Yes.
That's surprising. I guess, so you mentioned location. What were the benefits from being in New York?
Character, I would say. Who we inherently are as New Yorkers. We push really, really hard. I want to say that we socialize well, but maybe not all the time. We have a different standard than California does. If you're in California, you can just walk around and smell like weed. They're not asking themselves, do I smell like weed before I leave? So yeah, it's weird to operate like your life is on the line when you're doing this. And I don't really see that. It's fun for a lot of people in these recreational states. For us, it's do or die. There's employees years ago that I tried to hire who said no because their parents would feel too much shame. That's not what happens over there. And so what makes it different to be a New Yorker is you have to be way more resilient than anyone starting a cannabis business in any other state. Well, not any other state. We're not Mississippi, certainly, but we do have it harder. And we also know what's cool. A lot of us are cool. We're a fashion epicenter. There are a lot of things that are going on here. And I think bringing that to the table, of making things that New Yorkers would accept, but Californians would live by, that's kind of the middle ground that we've walked.
And what do you think we can learn by going to the states that you mentioned before, Colorado and the West Coast?
What a blooming cannabis culture looks like, what it's like to just meet other people who are ready to speak to you, who will engage with you, who won't push you away or think less of you. I mean, there are people that accepted me 4 or 5 years ago when I was just trying to make a name for myself. Some of them are currently working for Puffco. Some of them have become best friends. It's tougher in New York. It's tougher to be open. And events like this are everything because now there's a safe space where we can all go to and we all have the same like-minded goal. We want to grow within this industry. But yeah, it was much more difficult until stuff like this came along.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. What more can I do, can CannaGather do, can the people in the audience do to try to push the ball forward in terms of New York?
Well, there's a national culture now developing, right? It's not going to be just this hometown stuff. Puffco is a national company. We wear Brooklyn on our sleeve, but we are sold in all 50 states. We're sold internationally. So find out what trends are outside of New York. if you can make it here, you can make it everywhere does not necessarily apply to this industry. Everyone has a very specific flavor. People are not fighting each other over sour diesel in other states. It's not, it's just, yeah, it's not how it is. So going out there and seeing how diverse this culture is, from strains to people to the entrepreneurs that have made it. There are CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies who have spent years in jail as a sacrifice, doing the same exact thing they're doing now, legally. They spent years in jail for before. It's not as much of that around here. Not yet. So go out there and meet people. It's always worth to see how they're doing it somewhere else. And that is what inspired me to think Puffco can be as big as it is, was realizing this market is just bigger than people who don't want everyone to know that they're smoking weed in public.
I feel like there's a small business opportunity for folks in New York who want to like organize trips to the West Coast, and I don't know if people do that.
CannaGather will be in LA.
Yeah, well, let's set that up.
Yeah.
Any final words before we open up to Q&A?
No. I've done these before, so I know that almost all the time speakers aren't directly answering my questions. I have a pretty unique story, so I'm curious to hear your questions and hope to get specific with you guys. Yeah.
The question was, what is the difference in terms of path and trajectory for companies that are ancillary versus plant touching?
So being an ancillary company allowed me to start the company in New York. We don't touch cannabis. We design hardware. We go to legal states to test anything we make. Now we're operating out of a legal state. Being in an ancillary side of this industry means that you are outside of regulation. But that is why it's so easy for me to do what I do. We could have moved the company to Mississippi if we wanted to. I don't want to live there. I'd rather be in LA. But that's the freedom you have, is you can work anywhere, and so long as cannabis isn't touching your product where you're doing it, assuming it's not allowed there, you have all the freedom you want to do whatever you want. So that's why it's been certainly not easy, but easier than trying to create a cannabis company in New York.
Question? Right there. The question was, what's the sort of build and prototyping timeline for you guys?
So I know Justin is itching to answer that one. So as soon as we start drawing and we're like, all right, we like this design. Yes, we do have a 3D printer. The 3D printer kind of comes in once we're close to what we want to make. So now we have files, we're putting it into the machine, we're printing it. It's to make a feels-like version. And that's a part of the process, is you make a looks like and a feels like. We want to use it and know it will work the way we intend it to in the final version. Then we want a separate version that looks and feels the way that we want it to work in the final version. So the way we got from drawing to 3D printing, that gap is actually Justin playing with a bunch of clay. And he's sitting there molding it out, and he is extremely talented at sculpting. And he gets as close as humanly possible to the final design, and that's what we use as a reference of, does it feel right? Is the weight right? If the weight isn't right, what do we cut, fat off of? Or are we adding it to get it to be more bottom heavy? So for this project, it was clay. It was paper, clay, and 3D printing.
Question right there, blue shirt. Yeah.
Do you want to repeat the question? So
you guys hear that?
Yeah, the question was, if you're moving from a market like ours where we don't really have a lot of competition, you move to a market like LA where there are a ton of vaporizer companies, isn't it harder to be in a saturated market? No, I don't consider us to have very many competitors. There aren't a lot of companies. One, I don't know that there are any companies that are as big of users as us that are making products for themselves. But there are a couple of companies out there that are actually designing custom vaporizers. They're not buying rebranded China stuff. But the reason we're in LA is twofold. One, we're closer to the plant. I can test as much as I want. Any new consistency, whether it's a sauce, which is like this crystallized version with a bunch of terpenes on top, whatever is coming out, I have access to. It's right there. I can immediately put it in my product, see if it works well, and not wait for a customer to tell me how my product is going to work with what they're using. And the other side, which is one of the biggest reasons LA was important to us, is there is still this vibe of sacrifice to be a New Yorker working for a cannabis company. That doesn't exist in LA. We have our new head of operations is the former head of operations from Beats by Dre. Made it all the way through to their sale to Apple for $4 billion. That type of talent to jump into cannabis, from what I've seen, is not available in New York.
Except for you guys.
Yeah, except for some of you guys here, and this has been a new thing that's been popping up where people really, really want to enter. But in my experience here, they're doing us a favor. You know, they're leaders of their industry. They're coming from a space in our, when we're looking for them, they're coming from product development. And they see it as like, is this going to be a stain on my resume? How am I going to explain this later? That is not even a thought in LA. They are fighting to work for us. People from Adidas, just our current applicant list is so impressive, which is a far cry from what it was in New York. So that is the biggest reason. Is one, we get to be close to cannabis, and two, we have access to really talented people who are ready to be a part of this space, whether they're cannabis users or not.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, Claire. Question is, what does a fundraising process look like?
There wasn't one. Puffco is 100% bootstrapped. And the way we have made it this far is there's actually somebody, so, it doesn't come easy. Nobody was doing the work for us. There's somebody in the audience I noticed that I actually sold 10 Puffcos to out of my backpack 4 years ago. So we are self-funded because we put in the work.
What are your thoughts about raising versus bootstrapping?
It's not for me. I don't like, you know, I don't know that I should be saying this, but I am not the highest paid person in Puffco. I am actually quite down on that list. The reason that's the case, one of the reasons, is I get to wake up every day, chase my dreams, as of recently, win, and not go to sleep because I'm up thinking about doing it all again the next day. So I am not really super motivated by money. Obviously, I want this company to be as valuable as possible. It is valuable now. I don't want to do anything for anyone to make them $1 if that doesn't have me making something for myself as the goal to do it. And I just don't like owing people money. I don't like being told what to do. And that's kind of why I'm doing this, is, yeah.
So I feel like as an entrepreneur, it's you never really feel like you've won, but it sounds like you feel like you're at a winning phase. How long did it take you to get there?
Puffco is turning 5, it's just about now, and it's taken me about this long. It's been a crazy journey. We made products we believe in, and then we tried to make products that people would buy for one product. It was the Pro 2. It's really, really successful, but it's not why we woke up every day. And yeah, making this, which was an idea in 2014, and having it be as great as it is, and knowing that we get to continue chasing dreams as wild as they are, and having an expectation that they'll actually work out, that is everything to me right now.
Cool. Well, congrats. Let's do one more question right there.
The question was, how do you grow a large brand fighting the stigma that cannabis has? You just do. You're going to lose friends. I have friends now that are messaging me, when are you going to be back in New York? I really, really want to hang out. Those are friends that asked me to leave their work. I bumped into this one friend specifically, and he was like, shit, man, I'm at a work event. Would you mind not coming here tonight? Because he just didn't want people to see me. Because
Wait, what?
Yeah, it was a friend of mine. He worked for J.P. Morgan Chase.
Okay.
I was in like
No
this
offense to everyone that works at JPM.
this Broad Street area, and he was legit like, I don't want you around my coworkers saying that you're involved in cannabis because that's going to make me look bad. Now that same friend is reaching out, wanting to hang out with me. Hopefully he's not watching on my Instagram live right now. Whoops. But it sucked, you know, and whatever, dude. I am chasing my dream. I always felt like I was doing the right thing. If they thought that I was getting involved in drugs or something bad, tough shit for you, man. Guess I'm not the friend you're gonna have. So, yeah, do it for you. If somebody is not with it, they have a very closed mind, and I don't keep closed-minded friends too long, so.
Well, I know you can't make it to the after party, but can you stick around for a couple minutes for
Yes, I'm going to stick around. I am going to jump into the after party.
Oh, yeah, we did it. Good job, guys. Cool. So Roger's going to be there. Kieran's going to be there. You guys all have a ton of questions for them, I know. But this is actually going to be the first time we're ending on time. So round of applause.